On the evening of January 25th, 1967, in South Ashburnham, Massachusetts, Betty Andreasson, along with her children, mother and father, were enjoying a quiet evening at home. At the time, Betty was cleaning up in the kitchen, while her family was in the living room. Then, around 6:30 p.m., the lights suddenly began blinking, and the power went out. As the children became frightened in the darkness, Betty ran to comfort them, and a reddish, orangish light would beam through the kitchen window in the pitch dark house. Curiously, her father went to look out the kitchen window to see what it was. Shocked, he saw five odd looking beings coming toward the house in a hopping motion. He thought at first it was a prank and just kids, but he soon realized it wasn't children, and the beings were now floating. The wooden door then flew open, and five strange beings walked right in. Then, in a truly unbelievable event, the beings would put the family in a state of suspended animation. One being would then begin to speak with Betty telepathically, allowing her to move freely, while another one communicated with her father. Betty would later state she believed she was communicating with the leader. He was about 5 feet tall, while the others were around 4 feet. All the creatures had wide eyes, small ears, and noses and pear-shaped heads. Their mouths never moved and were only slits on their face. The creatures wore blue overalls with boots, with a big belt, and allegedly the sleeves of the overalls had a bird-like creature on them. The aliens had 3 fingers and didn't walk but floated from place to place. As everyone was held frozen, Betty felt relaxed, but she was also worried for her children. The beings realized this and assured her that they would not harm them. In a gesture of goodwill, they released one of her daughters temporarily so that she could tell Betty she was okay. Once assured her family would be okay, Betty agreed to be taken by the creatures. She was taken outside the home, and the beings transported her straight through the closed wooden door. She then levitated up to a silver UFO around 20 feet in diameter right in her backyard. One of the beings would stay behind and keep her family in suspended animation during this time. Then, Quazga, the leader, was able to make the craft seemingly vanish, although the interior of it Betty could see. They entered the craft, and Betty was taken to a red room. On the ship, she would be subject to test, although she would later recall they didn't frighten her. Allegedly, Betty would be taken to another world. She says when she next departed the ship, she saw a strange world with red sand and adobe or mud brick buildings. Here on this planet, Betty would have some religious type of experience. She would meet a being whom she believed was God and would be told she was the chosen one. Next, as she prepared to return, she would get a lecture from the leader, Quazga, who would let her know that she would forget everything for some time. Quazga then stated that the beings loved humanity and had came to help. Betty would return around 4 hours later and reunite with her family, who, at that time, were released from the trance-like state and safe. Initially, Betty was only able to recall certain things from the experience, such as the red light entering and the beings entering the home. As time progressed, though, Betty would attempt to have her story investigated and researched. In 1974, she reached out to the National Enquirer, who were looking for alien abduction stories. However, even the tabloid newspaper thought her story was too strange. Then, in 1977, the case would be examined by a full team of specialists. This included a solar physicist, an electronics engineer, an aerospace engineer, a telecommunications specialist, a UFO investigator, hypnotist, and psychiatrist. After 12 months, Betty had passed 2 lie detectors and endured 14 long, regressive hypnotic sessions. The results of this investigation revealed that Betty, along with her daughter, were able to give detailed descriptions of their encounter and what they experienced. Betty's daughter says she was abducted as well. The team would then conclude the claims probably were legitimate. Later, Betty would go on to recall previous encounters and abductions, as well as activity going into the 1990s. Her claims are still being investigated today, with at least half a dozen books written on the subject. Despite the attention, there doesn't appear to be a consensus view on whether these events were blown out of proportion or even actually happened. Some people believe that her Christian values might have influenced her claims around meeting a divine being. Other skeptics point to details of the story changing over the years. For example, in early drawings, the eyes of the beings were similar to human eyes. However, later sketches would show the eyes to be large and all black. One other thing that skeptics tend to point out is that the majority of her story was only made available after hypnotic regression. Leading questions in these sessions can create false memories. Non-believers also point out that she came forward in 1977, the same year the popular movie The Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out. Still, we should remember she did try and seek help in the years before. Believers of this case will point out that a team of specialists did investigate the case, and they all believed she was telling the truth. It also doesn't appear major details of the story changed over the years. Betty's entire family would back her story, except her husband, who was in the hospital at the time. This case is certainly a fascinating one, and will continue to be studied by researchers and ufologists for the foreseeable future.